Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together to immerse ourselves in both the text, the written text of Torah, and relationships of Torah, where we learn both from the text and from one another. This week we are starting a new book. We are starting the book of Deuteronomy. So we are in Parshat Devarim, which of course begins with chapter 1, verse 1 of the book of Deuteronomy. So if you have a Chumash, you can turn to it now. And at this point, I invite everyone to go ahead and unmute, and together we can recite our blessing for the study of Torah. And together we recite, Baruch
atah Adonai
Eloheinu
Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu
b'mitzvotav
b'mitzvotav
v'tzivanu
tivanu
la'asot
la'asot
b'divrei
b'divrei
Torah.
Torah.
Thank you, God, for this opportunity to immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. We'll read through the English translation of our Torah portion. I'll share with you a little bit of focus study, and then we'll open it up for everyone to have an opportunity to share their reflections and thoughts about this week's Torah portion. So chapter 1, verse 1, book of Deuteronomy. These are the words that Moses addressed to Israel on the other side of the Jordan, through the wilderness in the Arabah near Suf, between Param and Tophel, Laban, Hazeroth, and Dizchabad. It is 11 days from Horeb to Kadesh Barnea by the Mount Seir route. It was in the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, that Moses addressed the Israelites in accordance with the instructions that God had given him for them, after he had defeated Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, and King Og of Bashan, who dwelt at Ashtaroth and Edrei. On the other side of the Jordan, in the land of Moab, Moses undertook to expound this Torah, this teaching. He said, at verse 6, Dave, would you like to read a little bit there at verse 6?
I'd be honored. The Lord our God spoke to us at Horeb, saying, "You have stayed long enough at this mountain. Start out and make your way to the hill country of the Amorites and to all their neighbors in the Arabah, the hill country, the Shephelah, the Negev, the coast, the land of the Canaanites, and the Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. See, I place the land at your disposal. Go take possession of the land that the Lord swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to assign to them and to their heirs after them." Thereupon I said to you, "I cannot bear the burden of you by myself. The Lord your God has multiplied you until you are today as numerous as the stars in the sky. May the Lord, the God of your fathers, increase your numbers 1,000-fold and bless you as he promised you. How can I bear unaided the trouble of you and the burden and the bickering? Pick from each of your tribes men who are wise, discerning, experienced, and I will appoint them as your heads." You answered me and said, "What you propose to do is good." So I took the tribal leaders, wise and experienced men, and appointed them heads over you, the chiefs of thousands, chiefs of hundreds, chiefs of 50s, and chiefs of 10, and officials for your tribes. I charged your magistrate at that time as follows: hear out your fellow men and decide justly between any man and a fellow Israelite or a stranger. You shall not be partial in judgment. Hear out low and high alike. Fear no man, for judgment is God's, and any matter that is too difficult for you, you shall bring it to me, and I will hear it. Thus I instructed you at that time about the various things that you should do.
Thank you so much, Dave. And then Martine, would you like to read beginning at verse 19?
Thank you, Rabbi. We set out from Horeb and traveled the great and terrible wilderness that you saw along the road to the hill country of the Amorites as our God Adonai had commanded us. When we reached Kadesh Barnea, I said to you, you have come to the hill country of the Amorites, which our God Adonai is giving to us. See, your God Adonai has placed the land at your disposal. Go up, take possession, as Adonai, the God of your fathers, promised you. Fear not, and be not dismayed. Then all of you came to me and said, let us send emissaries ahead to reconnoiter the land for us and bring back word on the route we shall follow and the cities we shall come to. I approved of the plan, and so I selected from among you 12 representatives, one from each tribe. They made for the hill country, came to the Wadi Eshcol, and spied it out. They took some of the fruit of the land with them and brought it down to us. And they gave us this report. It is a good land that our God Adonai is giving to us.
Thank you so much. Mark Thompson, would you like to read beginning at verse 26?
Thank you, Rabbi. Okay, sorry about that. I'm getting a little lost here. Why don't you go ahead and I'll pick up
Okay.
later.
June, would you like to read beginning at verse 26?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah.
And they took of the fruit of the land in their hands
Here,
and brought
verse
it.
verse
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I
20
miss it?
26.
26. Yet you would not go up, but rebelled against the commandment of the Lord your God. And you murmured in your tents and said, because the Lord hated us, he hath brought us forth out of the land of Egypt to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us. Whither are we going up? Our brethren have made our heart to melt, saying, the people is greater and taller than we. The cities are great and fortified up to heaven. And moreover, we have seen the sons of the Anakim there. Then I said unto you, dread not, neither be afraid of them. The Lord your God, who goeth before you, he shall fight for you, according all that he did for you in Egypt before your eyes, and in the wilderness, where thou hast seen how the Lord thy God bore thee as a man doth bear his son, in all the way that ye went, until ye came unto this place. Yet in this thing ye do not believe the Lord your God, who went before you in the way, to seek you out a place to pitch your tents in fire by night, to show you by what way ye should go, and in the cloud by day.
Thank you so much. And let me invite Steve, would you like to read there beginning at verse 34?
Yes, thank you. The Eternal heard your loud complaint, and becoming angry, vowed. Not one of the men counted in the census, this evil generation, shall see the good land that I swore to give to your fathers. None except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, he shall see it. And to him and his descendants will I give the land on which he set foot, because he remained loyal to the Eternal. Because of you, the Eternal has incensed, and with me too, saying, the Eternal was incensed with me too, saying, you shall not enter it either. Joshua, son of Nun, who attends you, he shall enter it. Imbue him with strength, for he shall allot it to Israel. Moreover, your little ones, who you said would be carried off, your children who do not yet know good from bad, they shall enter it. To them will I give it, and they shall possess it. As for you, turn about and march into the wilderness by the way of the Sea of Reeds. You replied to me, saying, we stand guilty before the Eternal. We will go up now and fight, just as the Eternal our God commanded us. And the men among you each girded yourselves with war gear and recklessly started for the hill country. But the Eternal One said to me, warn them, do not go up and do not fight, since I am not in your midst, else you will be routed by your enemies. I spoke to you, but you would not listen. You flouted the Eternal's command and willfully marched into the hill country. Then the Amorites who lived in those hills came out against you like so many bees and chased you, and they crushed you at Hormah and Seir. Again you wept before the Eternal, but the Eternal would not heed your cry or give ear to you.
Thank you, Steve. Paul, would you like to read at the start of chapter 2?
Yes, Rabbi. We turned and journeyed to the wilderness toward the Sea of Reeds. And Hashem spoke to me, and we circled Mount Seir for many days. Hashem said to me, saying, enough of your circling this mountain. Turn yourselves northward. You shall command the people, saying, you are passing through the boundary of your brothers and the children of Esau, who dwell in Seir. They will fear you, but you should be very careful. You should not provoke them, for I shall not give you of their land even the right to set foot. For as inheritance to the children of Esau have I given Mount Seir. You shall purchase food from them for money, so that you may eat. Also water shall you buy from them for money, so that you may drink. For Hashem your God has blessed you in all your handiwork. He knew your way in this great wilderness for a 40-year period. Hashem your God was with you. You did not lack a thing. So we passed from our brothers, the children of Esau, who dwelled in Seir, from the way of their Arba, from Elat, and from Ezion Geber, and we turned and passed on the way of the Moabite desert. Hashem said to me, you shall not distress Moab, and you shall not provoke war with them, for I shall not give you an inheritance from their land. For to the children of Lot have I given Ar as an inheritance.
Thank you so much, Paul. Let me invite Mark Levenstein. Would you like to read a little bit beginning at verse 10?
Yes, thank you. It was formerly inhabited by the Amim, a people great and numerous and as tall as the Anakites. Like the Anakites, they were counted as Rephaim. The Moabites called them Amim. Similarly, Seir was formerly inhabited by the Horites, but the descendants of Esau dispossessed them, wiping them out and settling in their place, just as Israel did in the land they were to possess, which the Lord had given to them. Up now, cross the Wadi Zered. So we crossed the Wadi Zered. The time that we spent in travel from Kadesh Barnea until we crossed the Wadi Zered was 38 years, until the whole generation of warriors had perished from the camp, as the Lord had sworn concerning them. Indeed, the hand of the Lord struck them to root them out from the camp to the last man. When all the warriors among the people had died off, the Lord spoke to me, saying, you are now passing through the territory of Moab through Ar. You will then be close to the Amorites. Do not harass them or start a fight with them, for I will not give them any part of the land of the Amorites to you as a possession. I have assigned it as a possession to the descendants of Lot.
Thank you so much, Mark. Jim and Peggy, would you like to read beginning at verse 20?
Thank you, Rabbi. It too is counted as Rephaim country. It was formerly inhabited by Rephaim, whom the Amorites called Zamzummim, a people great and numerous and as tall as the Anakites. Adonai wiped them out, so that the Ammonites disposed them and settled in their place. He did for the descendants of Esau, who lived in Seir, when he wiped out the Horites before them, so that they dispossessed them and settled in their place, as it's still the case. So too with the Avram, who dwelt in villages in the vicinity of Gaza, the Kaphtorim, who came from Crete, wiped them out and settled in their place. Up, set out across the Wadi Arnon. See, I give into your power Sihon the Amorite, king of Heshbon, and his land. Begin the occupation, engage him in battle. This day I begin to put the dread and fear of you upon the peoples everywhere under heaven, so that they tremble and quake because of you, wherever they hear you mentioned.
Then I sent messengers from the wilderness of Kedemoth to King Sihon of Heshbon with an offer of peace as follows. Let me pass through your country, I will keep strictly to the highway, turning off neither to the right nor to the left. What food I eat, you will supply for money, and what water I drink, you will furnish for money. Just let me pass through. As the descendants of Esau, who dwell in Seir, did for me, and the Moabites who dwell in Ar, that I may cross the Jordan into the land that the Adonai our God is giving us. But King Sihon of Heshbon refused to let us pass through because Adonai had stiffened his will and hardened his heart in order to deliver him into your power, as is now the case. And Adonai said to me, see, I begin by placing Sihon and his land at your disposal. Begin the occupation, take possession of his land. Sihon, with all his men, took the field against us at Jahaz, and Adonai our God delivered him to us, and we defeated him and his sons and all his men. At that time, we captured all his towns, and we doomed every town, men, women, and children, leaving no survivor. We retained as booty only the cattle and the spoil of the cities that we captured. From Arar on the edge of the Arnon Valley, including the town in the valley itself, to Gilead, not a city was too mighty for us. Adonai our God delivered everything to us, but you did not encroach upon the land of the Ammonites, all along the Wadi Jabbok, and the towns in the hill country, just as Adonai our God had commanded.
Thank you so much, both of you. Barry, would you like to read a little bit at the start of chapter 3?
We made our way up the road toward Bashan, and Og, king of Bashan, with all his men, took the field against us at Edrei. But the Lord said to me, do not fear him, for I am delivering him and all his men and his country into your power. And you will do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who lived in Heshbon. So Adonai also delivered into our power Og, king of Bashan, with all his men, and we dwelt them such a blow that no survivor was left. At that time, we captured all his towns. There was not a town that we did not take from them, 60 towns, the whole district of Argob, the kingdom of Og in Bashan. All those towns were fortified with high walls, gates, and bars. Apart from a great number of unwalled towns, we doomed them as we had done in the case of Sihon, king of Heshbon. We doomed every town, men, women, and children, and retained as booty all the cattle and the spoil of the towns.
Thank you, Barry.
All right.
Let me invite Robin to go ahead and read there at verse 8. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thus we seized at that time from the 2 Amorite kings the country beyond the Jordan, from the Wadi Arnon to Mount Hermon. Sidonians called Hermon Sirion, and the Amorites call it Sinir. All the towns of the tableland and the whole of Gilead and Bashan, as far as Salca and Edrei, the towns of Og's kingdom in Bashan. Only King Og of Bashan was left of the remaining Rephaim. His bedstead and iron bedstead is now in Rabbah of the Ammonites. It is 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide by the standard cubit. And this is the land which we apportioned at that time. The part from Aroer along the Wadi Arnon, with part of the hill country of Gilead and its towns, I assigned to the Reubenites and the Gadites. The rest of Gilead and all of Bashan under Og's rule, the whole Argob district, all that part of Bashan, which is called Rephaim country, I assigned to the half tribe of Manasseh. Jair, son of Manasseh, received the whole Argob district, that is Bashan, as far as the boundary of the Geshurites and the Maachathites, and named it after himself, Havoth Jair, as is still the case. To Machir I assigned Gilead, and to the Reubenites and the Gadites I assigned the part from Gilead down to the Wadi Arnon, the middle of the wadi being the boundary, and up to the Wadi Jabbok, the boundary of the Ammonites.
Thank you, Rabbi. Justin, would you like to read beginning at verse 17?
Thank you, Rabbi. In the plain, the Jordan and the border thereof, from Kinneret to the sea of the plain of the Sea of Salt under the waterfalls of Pisgah eastward. And I commanded you at that time, saying, the Lord your God has given you this land to possess it. Pass over armed before your brothers, the children of Israel, all who are warriors. But your wives, your young children, and your cattle, for I know that you have much cattle, shall dwell in your cities, which I have given you. Until the Lord has given rest to your brothers, just as he did for you, and until they also possess the land which the Lord your God is giving them on the other side of the Jordan, then every man shall return to his possession, which I had given you. And I commanded Joshua at that time, saying, your eyes have seen all that the Lord your God has done to these two kings. So will the Lord do to all the kingdoms through which you will pass. Do not fear them, for it is the Lord your God who is fighting with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. That's our Torah portion for the week. I'd like to share with you a little bit of focused study, and then we'll open it up for everyone to share your thoughts and responses and reflections about this week's Torah portion. I note that this Shabbat is Shabbat Chazon, which means the Shabbat of vision, and it is a vision. The word Chazon comes from the Haftarah reading for this Shabbat, which is from the prophet Isaiah. And it is a vision that the prophet has of a restored temple after it had been destroyed, a redeemed people of Israel. And it is designed to come right before Tisha B'Av, which commemorates the destruction of the temple. So there is this vision of restoration that we ingest, that we assimilate before we go into a period of mourning for the destruction of the temple. So I want to kind of focus a little bit on this notion about visions and dreams, because here we are in the book of Deuteronomy, and the people of Israel are there poised at the Jordan River. They're getting ready to cross over and begin to settle in the land of promise. So this is going to be the fulfillment of this great dream that the people of Israel have had for hundreds of years now. It's been perhaps whispered while they were enslaved, whether they were enslaved. Parents would whisper to their children this promise that had been made to them, and that would sustain people during this period of exile, that there was this land that they would be able to return to. So in fact, this is the beginning of a fulfillment of a dream. And I want to kind of explore this notion about what does it mean to have a dream? What does it mean to begin to realize a dream? And it ties in nicely with the fact that it is Shabbat Chazon, the Shabbat of having a vision. So if you have the study sheet, I have a painting by an artist named Kate Hare, and a lot of her paintings have to do with dreams. And this is from a painting she did called Your Book. And we'll circle back towards the end of our study time together to discuss why I picked this particular painting out and what this notion about your book might mean. But our artist, Kate Hare, in writing about dreams and about how it influences her artwork, she said this: even if you don't remember it in the morning, you were exploring many beautiful and colorful works in your sleep. She's conveying the notion that when we sleep, even if we don't remember it when we wake up in the morning, there were these visions that were passing through us, and somehow she's saying impacts us in some kind of way, nurtures us in some kind of way, sustains us in some kind of way. And we're going to explore a little bit of those notions from our artists as we go through our study sheet. The first thing I want to note is at the very beginning of our Torah portion, which begins in the Hebrew, Ele Hadavarim Asher Diber Moshe. So this is, of course, where we get the name for our Torah portion, Devarim, which means words. And I want to contrast it with how the book of Numbers began. The book of Numbers began with Vayedaber Adonai El Moshe Bad Midbar Sinai. And God spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. The difference here is that in the book of Numbers, which opens up with this venture of moving from Exodus and beginning this long trek through the wilderness, God speaks to the people of Israel, speaks to Moses, and through Moses to the people of Israel. Vayedaber Adonai, God spoke. Here, there's a shift. It says, Ele Hadavarim Asher Diber Moshe. These are the words that Moses spoke. So whereas Numbers begins with God speaking, the book of Deuteronomy begins with Moses speaking. We're going to play out in the rest of our study sheet what's the significance of this shift from God speaking to Moses speaking. And in terms of this notion about what does it mean to have a dream, if we remember the whole 38 years of wandering, which began in the second year, the 38 additional years of wandering was the result of the scouts coming back and saying, it's a beautiful place, but we cannot possibly possess it. And if you remember, those who studied Shalachacha together, we know the Hasidic interpretation about the weakness of the scouts was that they didn't want to enter into the land of reality and responsibility. They wanted to stay in this so-called wilderness place. They wanted to stay in a land, if you will, of non-reality. They wanted to stay in the embrace of God and be taken care of by God. They didn't want to have to leave all that behind and go into a land where they would have to create structures of governance. They would have to engage in matters of farming practices and business practices and taxation practices and all the realities of what it means to run a country. They wanted to stay, as the Hasidic interpretation is, they wanted to stay in the land of super spirituality rather than enter into the land of reality and try to combine material and spiritual. So Maimonides, the great medieval commentator, in his Guide for the Perplexed, in talking about what does it mean to fulfill oneself, to have a sense of spirituality, which certainly is a high level value, he writes this: the well-being of the soul can only be obtained after that of the body has been secured. So for those of you who studied psychology, or you may see some resonance here with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow said there's this hierarchy of things that need to be met before other needs could be met. And he says the most basic need is that of food and clothing. And then comes shelter, then comes friendship, then comes esteem. And then finally, we reach the level of self-actualization. One of the interesting aspects of Judaism is the notion that while spirituality is indeed a high value to be able to achieve, it's built upon material reality. Material reality is not something that's to be discarded, avoided, downgraded. it's a building block for achieving a higher level of being. And indeed, what we're going to see here in the book of Deuteronomy is a series of lessons about the goal of what the Israelites are to achieve is not so much spirituality. Their mission is to create a good society. And that good society is a precondition for a life that includes spiritual experiences. So in fact, those who engage in a prayer practice, you may notice that when you recite the daily Amidah, the 18 blessing prayer that we recite every day, it has a certain structure to it. And the structure is this. The structure begins with, after acknowledging God's greatness and power, it begins to ask for things that have to do with living in this world, of having discernment, of having a restoration of good judges, of having a sense of justice. And it's only to get to the very last of these 18 that there's a sense of achieving some kind of return to greatness, a kind of redemption that results in having shalom, a sense of fulfillment and completeness. So the Amidah reflects this notion in Judaism that spirituality is achieved not by ignoring material reality, but by refining material reality, by building a good society. That's what the Amidah is all about. So Rabbi Jonathan Sachs has a lovely little description about the book of Deuteronomy, which is in number 3 on the study sheet. And he says that Deuteronomy is essentially about the creation of a society in which people are responsible and accountable to one another. And they do that within the context of a mutually agreed upon covenant and compact. And so the book of Deuteronomy is actually a repetition of a covenant that we have encountered previously in Torah. There was a covenant that God made with Noah. There was a covenant that God made with Abraham. There was a covenant that God made with the entire Jewish people at Sinai. And here, Deuteronomy, in effect, represents a fourth expression of a covenant. But the difference is, it's not whereas the other 3 were all being expressed by God, here it's being expressed by a human being. It's being expressed by Moses. And in a sense, as we've talked before about Moses, which is a name that doesn't really mean anything, Moses, in effect, is kind of a created character to represent a lot of things. And here, I want to suggest Moses is a stand-in for the human being in general. It is Moses who is now proclaiming a covenant. And it's being described not so much in terms of belief and doctrine, it's being described in terms of narrative, in terms of describing a history, in terms of reviving collective memory, the telling of a story of a people. This is what is going to bind the people together in terms of a covenant rather than a list of doctrines or beliefs. So here's what Rabbi Sachs has to say at number 3. The people have to learn to fight their own battles. They must discover that God is a force within rather than a force outside that fights their battles for them. They must discern the God who is close within the camp and not one who is distant, who performs miracles, liberates the Israelites, brings plagues against the Egyptians, sends the people water from a rock and food from heaven, and divides sea for them. Deuteronomy marks the move from the divine initiative to human responsibility. So this is the significance of, whereas Numbers begins with God speaking. Now in Deuteronomy, this concluding book, this concluding moment. This is actually a moment, a single moment, the book of Deuteronomy, at the edge of entering into the land of Canaan. It is Moses, a human voice, who is now speaking, because there's been this shift from the role of God, if you will, to the role of human beings in creating and fulfilling the promise. So, I'd like to focus for a few moments on significant key words that we find in the book of Deuteronomy, which gives us some hint as to what's involved, what does it take to create the kind of good society that will bring a fulfillment of promise, that will bring a sense of shalom, a sense of fulfillment, and that will allow us to fulfill our mission of bringing sanctity and holiness into this world. So if you have the study sheet, you can turn it over. You see on number 4, I've listed what I call covenantal language, and there are some significant terms that appear prominently in the book of Deuteronomy, much more than they appear in some of the other books of Torah. And the first is the sense of listen, Shema. And the word Shema occurs at least 92 times in the book of Deuteronomy. It's an absolutely key and essential concept within the book of Deuteronomy. And what we know about the word Shema is that it is not a word of obedience, quite the contrary, as we saw as it first appeared in the book of Exodus at Mount Sinai. The word Shema is a word encouraging people to attend to their own inner voice, which is a reverberation of the divine. It is an encouragement of human initiative and interpretation, rather than mere imitation and slavish obedience. So this is key to creating the kind of good society that will bring about fulfillment of the promise, to be able to listen, to be able to attend to the divine voice within each one of us. The second significant word is that of love. And the word love appears at least 23 times in the book of Deuteronomy. By contrast, in the book of Genesis, it appeared, I believe, 15 times. In the book of Exodus, it appears twice. In the book of Leviticus, it appears twice. And in the book of Numbers, I don't believe it appears at all. And the notion about love, both God's love for us, our love for God, our love for one another, is once again a dominant theme within the book of Deuteronomy. And here we have in Deuteronomy in chapter 10 these words: God upholds the cause of the orphan and widow and loves the stranger, giving them food and clothing. And you are to love those who are strangers, for you yourselves were strangers in Egypt. Once again, this notion about loving is a key concept, a key vocabulary word that helps us to construct an inclusive and just society. A third term that's fundamental to the book of Deuteronomy is that of remembering. And in chapter 8 and verse 2, we have this verse: remember the whole way that God caused you to walk. What's important, as we've already encountered in the opening portion of the book of Deuteronomy, is that the shaping experiences of a people's history is what seems to be so important to sustaining and nourishing and nurturing a people who will create a just and inclusive society, far more than doctrines or beliefs. So we carry those shared experiences within us. And we significantly, once a year at Passover, we tell that entire story. And actually, as a form of drama, we ritually reenact that experience so that we can remember and relive that and enervate it within us as a dynamic force. And finally, what's important, according to Deuteronomy, is to transmit all of this to the next generations. We'll see that in next week's Torah portion. Teach these words incisively to your children. And in Hebrew, the word for education, chinuch, comes from the Hebrew verb to dedicate. We know this word from Chanukah, it comes from the same root word, dedication. There's something about transmission of a history, transmission of a story, transmission of a narrative that is fundamental to getting people started on their path in the right way, this notion of dedication. So here we are coming up to Shabbat Chazon. And Shabbat Chazon, we read from the prophet Isaiah, this vision that he has of a restored temple and a redeemed people. And here are some key words from this Haftarah reading. What is it that we need to do? It's not just a gift that we receive. We have a job to perform, according to the prophet Isaiah, and it includes this: learn to do good, aid the wronged, uphold the rights of the orphan, defend the cause of the widow, and then beautifully, come now and let us reason together. This concept of reasoning together seems so fundamental to the restoration of a healthy and just society. I'd like to conclude with acknowledging that this notion about dreaming is something that we are reminded about every Shabbat when we are about to recite our blessing after eating. On Shabbat, we include Psalm 126. Shir Hamala Pashuv Adonai et Shivatinu Hainu Kahomim. So this is from Psalm 126. When Adonai restores the fortunes of Zion, we are like dreamers. Our mouths shall be filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. We are reminded at the conclusion of eating on Shabbat, this notion about restoration. And this notion about restoration has to do with fulfillment of a dream. I remember, yes, I dreamed all about this. This is what's motivated me, and now I'm nourished, and I'm nourished not just by the food, but I'm nourished by the dream, the revival of this dream. And now I have, as a result of Shabbat, not only the revival of that dream within me, but I have not just the physical strength as a result of the nourishment of food that we get on Shabbat, but Shabbat has kind of morally realigned me with sacred purpose and has given me the language that's necessary and important to achieving the fulfillment of a sacred and divine promise, to make it all real. This week, I received a beautiful email from one of our participants, Wendy Dolan, who remarked she really liked this notion about we are like dreamers, and she wrote, "Dreamers are those who dwell in hope." I thought that was so beautiful. And so, if you turn back to the painting by Kay Hare, this notion about your book is being wrapped up in this painting inspired by dreams. I want to suggest that the book of Deuteronomy is especially meant to be our book. It's the book that has made this transition from divine intervention, from divine initiative, from the work of miracles to human initiative, and to the work that we do as human beings in creating a just and inclusive society. And that is the dream that is ours to make real. So with that, I'd love to open it up to those who have some thoughts, reflections, comments that you'd like to make about this week's Torah portion. If you go ahead and raise your hand, I'd love to call upon you. Mark Thompson. And go ahead and unmute yourself.
That better?
Excellent.
Okay. I'm definitely struck by the style of language in Deuteronomy versus what we've read, at least in the previous section. I mean, I think that you brought out in your number one that Vaidaber as opposed to Ele Devarim, it draws that distinction very clearly, but it's almost as if you have a different author who's writing Deuteronomy, who's maybe writing it in the third person for Moses. And I find that Moses's personality kind of comes through. He's actually rather petulant in a couple of instances in the beginning. And I think it's kind of funny. I mean, let's see if I can find the part that I was referring to. Yeah, he says, I cannot bear the burden of you by myself. And then further along, he says, how can I bear unaided the trouble of you and the burden and the bickering? He's just so human. And I find it refreshing. So there's that part of Deuteronomy that it just really speaks to me that this is for us as opposed to something that's being handed down. And it's the language itself, I think, is pretty illustrative of that. The other thing I wanted to bring out, and I was actually wanted to ask you, is do you think that the study of Kabbalah is an example of waiting until you have a better understanding of the more material, basic aspects of Judaism before one studies something so esoteric?
Well, you know, one of the traditional protocols about studying Kabbalah is that you're supposed to have a family, you're supposed to be married, you're supposed to be grounded in this world before you begin to delve into these more esoteric concepts and pathways that has a tendency to take you out of this world. So postponing the study of Kabbalah until you're a certain age, until you've achieved a level of some stability in life, where you have a sense of attachment to this world, where you have a job, a profession, a way to earn a living, a family. These are all things, a mortgage. These are all things that tie you to this world.
Right.
And so I think, yes, I think it's very much along those lines.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And Cheryl, go ahead and unmute and share with us.
I was struck by the language, but the thing that came with me most is being horrified about these people that are being wiped out. Man, woman, and child, and just saving the goodies in the cities and the livestock. And I was wondering what the context is, or what the scholars have said to put that into a context that doesn't make us all just incredibly bloody people going in and wiping people out so we can have their land.
So a lot of ways to think about it. One is, as you were talking, I was also thinking about the number of peoples that we were not supposed to attack, that we were not supposed to take their land. So there's that as well. And then, yes, if you want to read this in terms of historical reporting, it certainly is very distressing to think about that other people had to be displaced in order for the Israelites to dwell there. On the other hand, if one is viewing this as a painting, as a bit of poetry, then one can read what's to be dispossessed are those aspects of ourselves that would make it difficult and impossible for us to dwell in a place that's designed to have a life that's designed to be full of justice and inclusion and be able to reach out. In other words, that there are aspects of ourselves that need to be purged if we are to reach a certain level of sanctity and well-being. Okay, so that's another way to read it.
Rabbi, there's the question that shows up for Pharaoh of God hardening the hearts of the king so that he didn't allow them to walk peacefully through the country, which is what Moses had asked for. And but God hardened his heart. And so then Moses came in and they killed everybody. And that's the same thing that happens with Pharaoh in Exodus. And so what is the rationale for that? What is the larger picture of that?
When we study the confrontation of Moses to Pharaoh, we noted that the words that are used initially in the first set of plagues is not that God did anything to Pharaoh's heart, but that Pharaoh did something to his own heart. And it's not till we get to about the sixth plague, I believe, that then substitutes for the subject of a verb, God doing something to Pharaoh's heart. So from that, we get a sense that people are, including Pharaoh, are given free will to choose how they're going to act. And at some point, that they reach a level of the choices that they've made have placed them on a path where, as the Talmud said, the way that someone wants to go, the universe helps that person to go. So that is the notion that we can draw from this word about what's happening to someone's heart, is that they have chosen this pathway of antagonism. They have chosen this pathway of being an obstacle to freedom, rather than, and I think it's important to keep that in mind as we read through this entire book of Deuteronomy, this shift away from the earlier image of God that we see, particularly in Exodus, as the one who's doing everything to everyone. Here in the book of Deuteronomy, this is a book about human governance rather than sacred divine intervention. So I think to keep that in mind when we see that this is how people are choosing to live. So let me go. There was Martine, and then we'll get to Paul. Yeah.
Thanks, Rabbi. And just to kind of piggyback onto what Cheryl said, and some of the things that you had said, I'm always struck that this is the parsha that is read the Shabbat right before Tisha B'Av. And this idea of, the literal of going in, take no prisoners, destroy so that you can have the land, and yet then the temple is destroyed twice, and we lament about that in Aicha. And then I one of the things that's new, and I appreciate your pointing out, the difference between God spoke in the beginning of Numbers and Moses speaking. So people coming up to the forefront and God kind of taking a back seat. And it's interesting, as I've been reading through Aicha, Megillah Aicha, that there's so many lines, so many sections of Lamentations, if you read between the lines, where there's this question of God, where are you? Where have you been? Why weren't you here to protect us? And it's just, this is kind of what happens when the children move out, the next generation moves out and has to kind of go it alone and set up their own society, and they become the heads of the house, and the parents kind of retreat into the background and, or pass away. And, suddenly it's the next generation, it's the children that are having to make the tough decisions and having to deal with crises and adversity. So those were some of the things that came up for me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay. And Paul?
Yeah. I hate to step on the message when it's such a beautiful message. I'm looking at the second page, and then the dreams on the first page. And in a way, the reason that I listen each week is that you're presenting the rose of the rose bush, and they're teaching me, you know, the aroma to enjoy, to see I'm looking at. And unfortunately, I'm there's in that rose bush, there's some thorns. And I'm getting to realize that a lot of those several thorns have really come down to, like last week we touched on, and Cheryl's touched on it today. It's really there was one thorn really that's generalized at all. And that on the one hand, you have God who's omni this and omni that, all that stuff, all the good stuff. He's supposed to know everything. And then you have these poor people that left the desert, and they have to go when God tells them, "Oh, I'm going to give you something." Well, that even though when they're slaughtering everybody, you know, there's some wounded and some killed on their part. So this gentleman is telling him he's giving him something. There's a big price. It's not for free. And so, and in war, we have Afghanistan, when people come home from wars, they have this traumatic experiences. So here you have that person who knows everything, and he built this free will that you just mentioned before into these other folks. But then when they don't want to do something, they don't want to go to a second or third or fourth war, you know, this gentleman over here who knows it all seems to be surprised. And so but he gave the free will over to these guys, but he should be able to predict it if he's all around. So they were each parsha, each week, I seem to be, you know, noticing this genocide stuff and all this other stuff. But God gets mad, you know, about these people, and it really bothers me that. So what happens is I tune in because I love the stuff that's being presented, but what happens along the way, the thorns get me, and so and I don't know if there's even an explanation, because I think it's a kind of an overall philosophical question where you have somebody's free will and it's a person that knows everything. You know, there's going to be contradictions.
Go ahead, Mark Thompson. Yeah, Mark? You'll have to unmute, Mark.
Paul, I wanted to respond to your comment about thorns. I think it's fascinating. And I'm reminded of my favorite philosopher, you know this, Rabbi, Spinoza. And Spinoza used to have a signet ring. And on the signet ring was an inscription of his initials, BDS, Benedict de Spinoza, and a picture of a rose bush, thorn, and on top of it, a rose. And underneath all of this was the Latin inscription, caute, be careful. So I think what this tells me is that we have to have both. We have to have both the rose and the thorns in order to be truly aware. I think it's a good thing.
Thank you. Let me call on Richard, who's here.
In the Song of Solomon, it says, I am my beloved grazes among the roses. The roses are the merits we get. But what I got going through the portion tonight, two lines in the very first page or so. The one is, the Lord our God spoke to us at Horeb, saying, you stayed long enough at this mountain, which parallels what you were saying, Rabbi, about we got to get with the real world now. And then on the next page, Moses says, fear no man, for judgment is God's, and any matter that is too difficult for you, you shall bring to me, and I will hear it. So I felt that this is saying, do the right thing. You've got a conscience in there. That's what that free will is about. There's a conscience, and you have to rely on that, come down off the mountain, plant your feet on the ground, and use the conscience that's God-given, and love one another. Simple as that.
Beautiful. So, you know, at a Jewish wedding, we don't conclude a Jewish wedding with like sending up doves or painting a rainbow. We end a Jewish wedding by smashing a glass. We end a Jewish wedding by smashing a glass in order to awaken ourselves from being inebriated with this love and this joy and the beauty of this couple coming together, we shatter the moment by stepping on that glass to remind ourselves there's a broken world. And the purpose of creating the union between these two people, of bringing, igniting greater love in the world, is to put those shards back together. We don't ignore the thorns. We don't ignore the broken glass. We're constantly reminding ourselves of it, because we remind ourselves of it because what is our purpose? Our purpose is to make the world better. And that comes from us. God isn't going to do that. And we'd be far better off if we stopped worrying about what God's going to do or not do, and worry about what we're going to do or not do. Okay. So other thoughts or reflections about this week's Torah portion? With that, I'd like to thank everyone once again for coming together. Our time together, our study together, our reading together always leaves me with a greater sense of joy and purpose. Renews my sense of committing myself to fulfilling the dream that we have been given, the dream of living in community with one another, of creating an inclusive society, of creating a sense of justice for all, and of creating a sense of shalom in this world. Thank you all very much. God bless you all. May your dreams endure, and may we make them real. Be well, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
Rabbi.
you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Right.